Oh? Yeah, my wife, she started in again, you know. She keeps throwing up to me. I worked in Las Vegas. I went broke playing the slot machines. Oh, Vegas, they got slot machines all over, even in supermarkets. I went into my container of milk, cost me $238. Now, I'll tell you the truth, I had trouble with my wife before we got married, you know. We went together for 6 months, then she gave me the air, told me it was all over. I said to her, what's the matter? Is there somebody else? She looked at me. She said, there must be. I'll tell you what, my wife, I never got no respect at all, you know. We were going steady. She told me don't talk about sex until we get married. We got married. She told me now you can talk about it all you want. I'm married 20 years. All I get is smart answers and bad cooking. My wife's cooking, forget about her cooking. But the other night I left over a hamburger. She used it to scrub the sink. Well, you had to come and get it. My house is try and eat it. The trouble with me is I'm too easygoing, you know. Like this afternoon, I had a bite to eat in a restaurant. I got busy. I had to share a table with someone. He sat down, an old man. Must have been in his 80s. I mean, this guy was old. I asked him to pass me the salt and pepper. He had to make 2 trips. I never get lucky in restaurants. I had dinner last night in a Chinese restaurant. I opened my fortune cookie. And it was a guy's check next to me. I said to him, hey, buddy, I got your check. He said, thanks. So, I mean, there's wise guys. I was going to take a little vacation, talk to some guy who works in travel agency. He told me I could spend 6 nights in Puerto Rico. No days, just 6 nights in Puerto Rico. I said to him, well, I do myself days. He says, you can do whatever you want, just keep out of Puerto Rico.
Good morning. It is Thursday, March the 2nd, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer, we will have police unions, Tucker Carlson, and Donald Trump. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. And now, there's no free lunch, 250 Economic Truths by David-Bahnsen.
The goal then should not be to manage prices. The goal should be to ensure that prices are free to fluctuate. Therefore, an emphasis should be placed not on containing prices, but on eliminating obstacles that attempt to change prices to something other than what is supported in the marketplace. Christopher Mayer. Policymakers get this wrong constantly, but I am not at all convinced they get it wrong by accident. Ideally, stable prices should be the aim of public policy, with fluctuations coming from those things impacted by human action: effort, demand, tastes, risks, etc. Marketplace forces may change prices, but the centralized planning or manipulation of prices is both distortive and destructive to the very efforts we want from economic actors, namely risk-taking, effort, and productive behavior.
And that was There's No Free Lunch by David-Bahnsen. Back in a minute. Thank you. So there's news today in Southern California besides the weather, and that is that the police department, the Police Protective League, which is the LAPD's union, has given okay or is promoting the idea of having unarmed officers, so non-sworn, I guess, officers, respond to certain calls. And the first thing I thought of when I heard of this was, yes, typical. A lot of people are thinking in terms of people that are supposed to be on the right, that are supposed to be fairly sober people, are thinking in terms of, we're on the side of the police department. And so they have this mentality where anything the police department does is okay by me. Is right. Just so long as they're protecting me from the bad guys, And they have a tendency to be, I think, held hostage, and not even think, it's absolute fact. Police unions hold the community hostage. There's always the implied threat that if you don't do things our way, you don't give us our raises, don't give us what it is that we want, we will either go on strike or we'll just simply resign and leave you to the tender mercies of all the gangbangers, etc. So that's why there should be a law in Congress that no police or law enforcement agency in the country is allowed to collectively bargain. It should be banned, period. End of story. But anyways, in the meantime, the police department is, again, basically what they're doing is they're lessening their workload. There's two things. You can either go out and get more money. You go to the community and say, I want to raise in pay and benefits. Or you can, if you can't get that, because the police department is facing a tough sell. They're going to be, if their contract isn't up, it's going to be up. I think if they do it for 5 years, it's going to be up. And police departments around the country are not held in high esteem right now. They really aren't. And their public relations-wise, they have taken some major hits. And we all know what they are. So, but they still want it. They have to produce for their members. That's as an aside here, that's one of the biggest faults of any union, is that they never go away. And since they're always there and they're always taking money from their members, they must justify their existence. Okay, and that's what this is all about, justifying the existence of the police union. The union can go to its members and saying, okay, may not be able to get you the kind of raises that we think that you deserve, but what we're going to do instead is cut your workload. Because that's the direction every union goes. More pay for less work. Okay. The unions are the ones that came up with the ideas of weekends, of sick time, of retirement. That's all union thinking, because that's the ultimate union goodie, is retirement, where you get paid to do nothing. And that's the ultimate for unions. Paying people to do zero. So this is a step in that direction. But you hear a lot of people analyzing this, people supposedly on the right, analyzing this in fallacious and rather superficial ways. So think about that. When you have the unions, they never go away. And this is another thing I was thinking about, is another aside here, is that having a law that says, at the very least, if you can't get rid of public employee unions outright, make these unions be recertified annually. Every year, the membership must vote the union up or down. Okay, so then at least you got a shot at getting rid of the union, where the union members may say, you know what do we need this for? Why are we paying all these dues? We don't need it anymore. We're doing very well on our own, and vote them out of existence. And because otherwise they stick around, and the longer they stay around, the more they have to justify their existence. And they come up with crappy things like this. This doesn't serve the community's interests. Having unarmed officers, non-sworn, non-union officers responding to certain calls doesn't help anybody except the unions. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, a little bit of Tucker Carlson. Looks like it's going to be 13 minutes. And one of the things he's talking about is the Murdaugh case.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson. Tonight there is a verdict in that very depressing but also Byzantine and interesting murder trial in South Carolina tonight. We've got Judge Janine in a moment to take us through exactly what happened and what happens next. But first, you always imagine in your mind's eye that it's evil men who destroy a society, wild-eyed, spit-flecked dictators pounding the podium to demand the annihilation of their enemies. That's the Hollywood version of it. But in real life, people like that rarely get very far. They're too obvious. It's not the cartoon demons you've got to worry about. It's weak men in positions of power. They're the most dangerous. Men with no principles but the desire for self-preservation. Hollow men who live in terror of being revealed for who they really are. Men who will do anything to save themselves. That's who you should be afraid of. And you can see that in our current moment. The weakest are the most destructive. How much of his childhood do you think Adam Kinzinger spent hanging from the wedgie nail? How many swirlies did Eric Swalwell endure in high school? How old was Adam Schiff before a girl other than his sister kissed him voluntarily? It makes you shudder to think about it. These are sad, insecure, broken men filled with envy and bitterness from their lonely childhoods. They hate you because they hate themselves. It's not their masculinity that's toxic, it's their lack of it. That's really the story of the Biden administration. The weakest president in history joined forces with the weakest attorney general in history to create a police state. Shocking? Well, once you understand the principle, it shouldn't really surprise you. And it's funny now to remember that the smart people in Washington once told us that Merrick Garland was a moderate. They thought that apparently because when Garland's promised Supreme Court seat didn't materialize, he cried. Oh, he's crying, they thought. He's so sensitive and thoughtful. But no, Merrick Garland was crying for himself because he is a self-pitying careerist with no perspectives on his own life, whose job is everything to him. He is, in other words, literally the last person you would ever put in charge of the Department of Justice. So naturally, Joe Biden did. And that turned out to be a pivotal decision. Merrick Garland has presided over the most aggressive attack on civil liberties, and in particular an attack on the practice of traditional Christianity, that any living American has seen. Now, Garland would never say that in public, of course. That would be too straightforward. His approach is feline, not canine. Every word is a weasel word. But under sustained questioning, the real Merrick Garland emerges, and it is filthy and dishonest. Here he was in the Senate yesterday, facing off against Mike Lee of Utah.
DOJ has announced charges against 34 individuals for blocking access to or vandalizing abortion clinics. And there have been over 81 reported attacks on pregnancy centers, 130 attacks on Catholic churches since the leak of the Dobbs decision, and only 2 individuals have been charged. So how do you explain this disparity?
We apply the law equally. I will say you are quite right. There are many more prosecutions with respect to the blocking of the abortion centers, but that is generally because those actions are taken with photography at the time, during the daylight, and seeing the person who did it is quite easy. Those who are attacking the pregnancy resources centers, which is a horrid thing to do, are doing this at night, in the dark.
Okay, in case you didn't follow that, we quote, apply the law equally. We just can't for some reason manage to investigate crimes that occur after dark. It's the sundown rule, well known in legal circles. It's hard to believe that Merrick Garland actually said that in a Senate hearing until you remember that, of course, he will say anything, and he does. We're not persecuting Christians, he'll tell you. Then he'll send the FBI after Mark Houck. Houck is a pro-life lay preacher who was praying outside an abortion clinic when a pro-abortion extremist harassed his 12-year-old son. So as any father would, Houck shoved the man out of his son's face. That's what happened. It was not a crime. We know that because no local prosecutor pursued it. And it is certainly, without question, not a federal felony to push a lunatic out of your 12-year-old son's face. But under Merrick Garland, it is now a felony. Almost a year after that happened, Garland sent armed men to arrest Mark Houck in front of his family.
On September 23rd, about 6:45 in the morning, that's when those 20 so-called agents, full SWAT gear, heavily armored vests, ballistic shields, helmets, battering ram, banged on my door.
Yesterday, Josh Hawley asked Garland to explain that behavior, the utterly indefensible totalitarian behavior, and Merrick Garland, of course, in his soft-spoken way, was delighted to defend it.
examples. Let's take a look at the hardened criminals that your Justice Department sent these armed agents to go terrorize on that morning. Here they are at Mass. Here's the 7 children with Mr. Houck and his wife. He has offered to turn himself in. And this is who you go to terrorize. You are the Attorney General. Give me your answer. Do you think that it was objectively reasonable and they followed your guidelines in sending 20 to 30 armed agents to terrorize these people? Yes or no?
The facts I have, which are those presented by the FBI, are not consistent with your description.
So you think it was reasonable?
I'm saying the facts are not as you describe.
You use an unbelievable show of force with guns that I just note liberals usually decry. We're supposed to hate long guns and assault-style weapons. You're happy to deploy them against Catholics and innocent children.
He doesn't care. He's got no soul, obviously. And if anything, Josh Hawley's description is too narrow. It's not just Catholics that Merrick Garland has targeted with force. It's anybody who expresses a belief in biblical Christianity in public. But it is true that Catholics do seem to be getting a disproportionate share of federal law enforcement attention under Joe Biden. The FBI, as you may know, has drafted a memo claiming that radical traditional Catholics are somehow a national security threat, presumably because they tend to pray outside of abortion clinics. In March of 2021, Paul Vaughn and 10 others were peacefully praying at an abortion clinic in Tennessee. They didn't damage any property. They hurt no one. More than a year after they dared to do that, to pray, Merrick Garland sent the FBI to terrorize Vaughn and his 11 children at their home.
But if you're not going to let me, then I'll just...
No, I want to know why you were banging on my door with a gun.
Hey, let's go back to it.
You're not going to tell me anything?
No, they're not. I tried.
No, you didn't.
Yes, I did.
You did not try.
You have to wonder when you see a tape like that, where are so-called Christian leaders? Where's Russell Moore and all the other breastfeeding Christians as that happens, as the U.S. government cracks down on Christianity, on prayer? Silent. Paul Vaughn and his co-conspirators now face more than a decade in prison. Meanwhile, just in case you want to know what the scale is for punishment, the Department of Justice under Joe Biden let half the rioters go who tried to torch a courthouse in Oregon. No charges whatsoever. Of 99 cases that the Portland U.S. Attorney brought over that courthouse siege for crimes like assaulting federal officers and civil disorder, more than 47 were dropped by DOJ. The most serious penalties for most of the defendants who pleaded guilty turned out to be community service. So the DOJ under Merrick Garland absolves Joe Biden voters of actual terrorism while doing everything they can to terrify, humiliate, and destroy people who pray in public. They're targeting specifically anyone who is religious, humiliating them in front of their children. Now, why are they doing this? Well, because on some level, all governments hate religious people because it's competition. And revolutionary governments, totalitarian governments, go after religious people first. It happened in the French Revolution, it happened in the Bolshevik Revolution, and it's happening now. That's why parents who dare to complain about their children being sexually indoctrinated and openly sexualized are attacked, in some cases, by the DOJ. Again, you can see why. Young people raised to believe that God is in charge are much harder for the government to control as they grow up. They won't worship the government. But, by contrast, if a child is raised to be a narcissist, someone who thinks, well, I can change my gender, he will grow up confused, weak, and reliant on the people in charge of the state. It's a very simple principle. It's why the Maoist government went after Tibetan monks. Anyone who sincerely believes in God is a threat. And that is the measure of a free country in the end. Are you allowed to believe that there's an authority higher than the people in charge of your government? That has always been the hallmark of America, religious liberty. It's in the First Amendment. But in Canada, of course, that's all disappeared. Canada has now become an atheist totalitarian state with amazing speed. And in Canada, it's now a crime to object to sexualized drag shows for children. You're not allowed to say a word. Late last month, a pastor in Calgary was violently thrown out of an all-ages, in other words, for children, drag queen story hour for daring to object to the sexualization of children. Watch this.
We are now calling the police. Stop. We have the police coming, so it is your choice to leave or deal with the police.
So that's the video. That's what happened. Who committed the violence in that video? The guy on the ground was the pastor. Before we answer the question, some context will remind you that in Canada, showing any disloyalty at all to the Trudeau government could get your bank account frozen and your truck seized. So maybe you're not surprised to learn that that man on the ground, whose name is Pastor Derek Reamer, who showed profound disrespect for Justin Trudeau's ongoing efforts to sexualize children and mutilate the genitals of children, woke up yesterday to the police banging on his door and telling him he was going to be arrested.
Why are you showing up at my home?
This is where you live, right?
Yeah, you guys could call me and we could...
Sorry, was that?
You could have called me.
I've been trying to.
When?
This morning. We need to talk about what happened on the weekend this evening, right?
Why do we need to talk about it?
Because you're going to be arrested for it and charged.
Okay.
So we can go deal with it this morning, or I can just put warrants out for you.
Charged with what?
Mischief and causing a disturbance.
Where are all the professional Christians? You have to wonder that again. Where's David French and Beth Moore and Tim Keller and all these people who are defending Christianity as actual Christians are being arrested for being Christians? Not a word. Well, today, Pastor Derek Reamer confirmed that a warrant was out for his arrest for hate crimes, and he was right about that. He was not overstating it, because this afternoon, he was literally arrested. Watch.
Then I put on the arrest for outstanding warrant. I will still make
Is there a reason you're blocking me from using the sidewalk?
Obstruction, they're working here.
I'm not going to obstruct them. Don't worry, I'm not going to run.
I'm not worried about you. We're just going to stay out of their workspace.
Do you mind if I ask you what he's being arrested for?
You're going to provide your identification.
Pardon?
Will you provide your ID?
It's for you to answer the question.
Yeah.
Okay. Why is he being arrested?
He has warrants.
Warrants out for his arrest?
This is what happens when we go against the drag.
Wow! That doesn't look like the Canada you thought you knew. All Molson and sled dogs, or some stormtrooper in sunglasses won't answer a question before you provide your ID.
And that was Tucker Carlson, and about he never did get to the Murdaugh case. Anyway, so Murdaugh was found guilty. It only took a couple of hours, and not that there was going to be much of a doubt. I don't understand why he decided to go to trial. He probably should have gone ahead and taken a plea if it was offered. But whatever, I guess that's on him. But as far as this is all concerned, also what you have to remember, always consider in situations like this when we're talking about all these people that are getting arrested, political theater. One of the things I noticed with all these people that are getting arrested is that they are people that they violate the number one commandment of being a conservative. Don't go look for trouble. All of these people also are Christian, and or at least claim to be Christian. I assume because they call themselves pastor this and pastor that they are Protestants. In any case, the reason I say that they're Christian is because there's a book that I have read on my podcast called A False Kind of Christianity, in which the left, the Marxist left, has infiltrated our churches. Now, Marxism and Christianity have several points of agreement. One of them is about the poor. Okay, so the church is very concerned about the poor. Marx is very concerned about the poor. And as a matter of fact, a lot of Marxists have gone into churches trying to make the case that Jesus Christ was a socialist, which is absolutely ludicrous. But the point here is that when they get into churches, they can influence the churches and the people in it, the laity and the priests and pastors and whatnot, to go in the wrong direction. to start following Karl Marx instead of Jesus Christ. Okay? So, one of the ways that you can know that, or get at least an idea as to whether or not you or somebody else is following Marx instead of Christ, is asking yourself the question, is this activity that they're engaged in egocentric? Are they the ones that are being the agents of change? They're being change agents, and if so, they're Marxist or acting Marxist. They may believe with their whole hearts that they're acting in a Christian way, but not so. God, for all, it should be all people, but at least for all Christians, God is the agent of change, the only agent of change. So it says in the Bible, so it says, all over the place. God is the agent of change, and that we human beings are merely the instruments of that change. So that's the question you got to ask yourself. Is what the individual is doing, is it God-centered or is it ego-centered? And if it appears to be ego-centered, then this is a person that is, at the very least, confused. They think they're following the will of God, when in reality, they're following the will of Marx. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, 5 minutes with Donald Trump.
Joe Biden claims to support American manufacturing, but in reality, he's pushing the same pro-China globalist agenda that ripped the industrial heart out of our country. It ripped us apart. Biden and the globalists support raising taxes on American production. They support more crippling regulations killing American jobs. They support skyrocketing domestic energy costs. And they support massive anti-American multinational agreements that send our wealth and factories overseas. Very simply, the Biden agenda taxes America to build up China. China is the big beneficiary. We cannot let that happen. And just a couple of years ago, it wasn't happening. China paid to the United States hundreds of billions of dollars, and no other president got 10 cents, legitimately 10 cents from China. My agenda will tax China to build up America. The heart of my vision is a sweeping pro-American overhaul of our tax and trade policy to move from the Biden system that punishes domestic producers and rewards outsourcers to a system that rewards domestic production and taxes foreign companies and those who export American jobs. They will be rewarded, and rewarded greatly, and our country will benefit. To achieve this goal, we will phase in a system of universal baseline tariffs on most foreign products. On top of this, higher tariffs will increase incrementally depending on how much individual foreign countries devalue their currency. They devalue their currency to take advantage of the United States, and they subsidize their industries or otherwise engage in trade cheating and abuse. And they do it now like never before, and we had it largely stopped, and it was going to be stopped completely within less than a year. As tariffs on foreign producers go up, taxes on American producers will go down, and go down very substantially. And that means a lot of jobs coming in. Not only will this system end our gaping trade deficits, and they are massive right now, and bring back millions of American jobs, it will also bring trillions and trillions of dollars pouring into the United States Treasury from foreign countries, and allow us to invest that money in American workers, American families, and American communities. This plan will be the linchpin of a new strategic national manufacturing initiative that builds on my historic success in ending NAFTA, which was a tremendous thing, a tremendous achievement. Nobody thought it could be done. And we did USMCA, US, Mexico, Canada, and it was an incredible thing. But we're also going to end other unfair trade deals, and we'll end them quickly. In addition, as a matter of both economic and national security, I will implement a bold series of reforms to completely eliminate dependence on China in all critical areas. We will revoke China's most favored nation trade status and adopt a 4-year plan to phase out all Chinese imports of essential goods, everything from electronics to steel to pharmaceuticals. This will include strong protections to ensure China cannot circumvent restrictions by passing goods through conduit countries that don't make a product, but all of a sudden they're selling a lot of product. It comes right through China, right out of China, and right into our country. We will also adopt new rules to stop U.S. companies from pouring investments into China and to stop China from buying up America, allowing all of those investments that clearly serve American interests. We're not going to allow bad things to happen to our country anymore, and we will eliminate federal contracts for any company that outsources to China. Biden will never get the job done. He is weak on China because the corrupt Biden family has received millions and millions of dollars from entities tied to the Chinese Communist Party. Everybody knows that. They try and hide it, and the fake news doesn't want to talk about it. Biden's pro-China economic program puts America last, and it's killing our country. My cutting-edge trade agenda will revitalize our economy by once again putting America first. And by the way, we'll get along very well with China. And you know what the reason is? They'll respect us again like they did just 2 years ago. We will quickly become a manufacturing powerhouse like the world has never seen before. Thank you very much.
I always wanted to invest, but I didn't know where to start.
And that was Donald Trump, 5 minutes of Donald Trump talking about China and his policies should he become president again. Back in a minute.